Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here I am, John Sneisen, and let's talk about Canada some more. As of recently, we know that Trudeau was reelected. It all comes back to people just voting their colors, their flags, whatever it might be, and it doesn't change the fact that the central banks are still doing the same things that central banks do: centralize, print, create vast amounts of debt that enslave you, the populace. Now let's go into this article out of the Financial Post. It says, surge in number of Canadians who can't pay their debts has economists worried and scratching their heads. Now, first, before I go into the article, I can't help but notice that these economists are scratching their heads that there's vast amounts of debt. The same things we've been warning about here at WAM for years has economists scratching their heads. And the reason for that being that the economists, the mainstream economists, the Keynesians, are all a bunch of stupid monkeys. Of course they're scratching their head. They're scratching the debt out of their hair like lice. Anyway, let's get into this article that says, a surge in the number of people who can't pay their debts is raising eyebrows in Canada. Some 11,935 consumers filed for insolvency in September, according to the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, a 19% increase from a year earlier and the biggest annual gain since 2009. So far in 2019, there have been 102,023 consumer insolvencies, the second most for the first 9 months of a year in records dating back to 1987. While the increases are coming from low levels, the trend is a worrying development that suggests cracks are starting to appear in Canada's household debt landscape, at least for the most extended individuals. That would be all the more concerning since it could foreshadow pressure on the country's financial system, and it's a bit of a puzzle given the economic backdrop has been positive, including an unemployment rate that's dropped to historically low levels. And I quote, normally there's a story you can tell, like there's some underlying weakness that shows up with a bit of a lag in personal bankruptcies and insolvencies, said Stephen Gordon, an economics professor at University Laval in Quebec City. It's just hard to see that now. It's perplexing. Insolvencies are accelerating at a pace that's been associated with periods of distress. The start of the 2008-09 financial crisis, immediately before the 1990-92 recession, and during the period of pronounced economic weakness in 1995 to 1996 that was tied to the Mexican peso crisis. The significance for the latest data is open to debate. For one thing, the insolvency numbers are at odds with other indicators that show a more benign environment for household debt. For instance, mortgage arrears were 0.23% nationally at the end of July, close to the lowest they've ever been, and delinquency rates on non-mortgage debt remained subdued. In addition, a strong labor market, rising wages, interest rates that are lower than they were at the start of the year, and a recovery in home prices all suggest borrowers should have more breathing room, not less. Man, these people are delusional. Carrying on, it says, it's hard to square the jump in insolvencies with the backdrop, according to David Tulk, a Toronto-based portfolio manager at Fidelity Investments. Maybe it isn't a trend that would represent the average borrower, but it is instead catching the fringe that have overextended themselves, he said in an email. That's not to say he's downplaying the insolvency numbers, but rather they confirm his prior comments about Canadian households. What I worry about more is that households use the retrenchment in rates to add even more leverage, and then we get an employment shock, he said. So let's talk about this a bit, John. I could go deeper into this article. There's lots to be said, especially just there were 5.3 filings for every $1 billion, $760 million in total household debt as of September versus 17.8 in 1997. I think it goes without saying that debt has reached, well, peak debt. So can you go into this a bit, John? I find it interesting that people are saying everything's getting better. These economists are saying that it's perplexing. I mean, it seems like they're missing the point entirely. What do you think?
Well, they're working at a brainwashed cult at the central bank. That's their problem. Well, first of all, actually, the Canadian central bank doesn't even print money. The government is using the actual commercial banks here in Canada to print the money, like in the Federal Reserve. That's how they circumvented it back in 1974, because Canada has a public central bank that. Not that that is any good, but in a public central bank, they actually have to ask the population if they could print money, because the actual population owns the central bank here in Canada. So it's very different from the
In
Federal
a
Reserve.
communist sort of way, yeah.
Oh yeah, but there's not to say that there's a lack of central banks that have been publicly run that have failed massively over time. It's tons of them as well, on top of the commercial bank run ones. But the major problem in Canada has been, of course, the debt problem in real estate. And real estate is as I gotta talk about my book, because I wrote this book back in 2016, starting to warn about all this stuff. But the book is called The Greatest Economy in the World ? You could find it on Amazon. But there I was warning about, that Canada was very heavily dependent on real estate construction, and almost 20% of their GDP comes from construction and construction related related businesses. So what you saw is, the Canadian economy has been heavily reliant, and if you take a look at the major markets, which is ridiculous, like this is 2018 numbers, Josh, that I'm looking at from Vancouver. The average detached house price as of August 2018 in Vancouver West was a 3.27 million Canadian dollars. The actual income required to qualify for this was 450,000, and then you see the actual median household income for that same region there is 65,327, and the gap is as high as 384,965. That's the difference between the actual what you need to qualify and versus what the average population in just the Vancouver West district has. So it's just ridiculous. And most of the actual, out of the 21 that's listed here on my chart, Josh, you have only, there's only 5 of them at the bottom that is not above $1 million in average house price, which is just beyond ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like when you look at those house prices, then we could I'm just gonna go into the second worst market in Canada, which is Toronto, of course. In Toronto, it's not as bad, because the average home price there is 804,584. So it's not ridiculous as Vancouver. Vancouver is just like beyond. I don't even know what to say. Like it's worse than of course California, LA and all those places. It's even crazier than that. But in Greater Toronto area, you need the price of the house versus your income is 20 times. So that is, and the median income there is 94,463. So what you see is there's, which is like your mortgage should be about 3 to 1. That'd be healthy, whatever. Of your annual income. Well, now you're looking at 20. Like the lowest one in Ontario is Thunder Bay, which is a tiny little place, in the middle of nowhere, which has 6 to your income, the price to income. So it's still massively over an expensive real estate here in Canada. Even though we had, it started in 2017. We got right after I finished reading my book, we had the Home Capital Group collapse here in Canada. And then, of course, it was bailed out by none other than Warren Buffett. And then, now just recently, I think, I don't remember if he did a video on it or not, but Home Capital Group did a mortgage-backed security that was rated AAA.
It's so crazy, John. I have to also point out, look, these housing bubbles are going to burst out one way or another. They already partially have, but I mean, with all the printing, all the propping up, all the manipulation, obviously it's been pushed off longer. I have to add also that they mentioned that, unemployment is at crazy low, and it's like the employment numbers are hidden in the labor force participation rate. They stole that from the United States. It's all fake. It's fake numbers, folks. And this is what I want to get to, though, before I go back to you, John, is people are continuously being used and abused by the system that wants you in debt. They are forcing the populace into a vast amount of debt, and it's only getting worse. They love that people are broke. They love that people are impoverished. They love that we are seeing a constantly growing rate of homelessness across the country. And then they'll say, well, unemployment is at an all-time low and everything's fine. It's all bull, folks. They want you in debt servitude. This amount of debt, this is great for them because it pushes you into servitude to them. It makes you desperate and means that you are going to desperately look for someone to save you. It doesn't matter if it's Trudeau or Scheer. It doesn't matter left or right. It doesn't matter. The government is able to maintain their power by pushing you further into servitude, and the banks hand in hand via legal tender laws and fractional reserve lending and all that kind of stuff tied to the central banking system, which is the number one culprit, the central bank, that we have the problems we have today. And people keep blaming it on other things that are very, very elementary compared to what the central bank does to the individual and how it affects your pocketbook, while stealing 50 to 65% of your money when you include all taxes and inflation and all that kind of stuff. It's criminal. You are being used as a slave, as a pawn, and you need to break free. It comes down to you to break free, to stop laying down and electing a new, complete criminal, fraud moron to solve the problem they created in the first place. Now, John, how long do you think that this is going to continue? How can it possibly sustain itself any longer? You'd expect people to have torches in Ottawa at this point.
Well, yeah, it's not sustainable at all, Josh. And the problem is that, we've been prolonging this for way too long. And so I actually took a look at, the official inflation rates here in Canada, because I was curious to see how I did a presentation for some local people here on the cashless move in Canada. What I found out that actually Canada's been printing more and more currency, actual physical coinage and notes into circulation. And what I also found was that M2 and M3, I believe M3 was all the way up at almost 10% annually in increase. So I was wondering to myself, where's all this inflation going? M3 is all the debt, all the money and debt in existence. So I was curious, what's the massive disconnect versus the 1.9 official number, or the inflation rate month over month being 0.4 negative right now? Where's the disconnect versus, people having less and less money and not being able to afford anything? And of course, this bankruptcy thing is a pressure on inflation, because what it does is as soon as you have bankruptcies, people can't pay their mortgage, whatever debt they have. What you got to understand is that people will then, the debt will disappear because they can't pay. When they declare bankruptcy, that debt becomes null and void. So what happened is that puts deflationary pressure on the economy. But what I found, though, was very interesting, and it just shows you how blatant. I don't know if it's just pure manipulation or just stupidity again, because you hear these economists saying that, oh, it's a shocker that, why is people going bankrupt after being the number top, I think it's the 6th most indebted country in the world. Why is people going bankrupt? I don't know what's going on. It's just ridiculous and laughable listening to people that have been in school for 7 to 10 years to get a PhD, and then they have so little lack of knowledge of the real economy.
These are the people that are handling people's money, because people have been taught to not actually give a damn about their own financial stability. They put it in the hands of other people that take advantage of them. At the banks, these bankrupt entities, if you look at their own cash to deposit ratios, these banks are bankrupt. You've exposed that yourself. I think it was 2 years ago now. People don't listen. They look for things to help them. They become dependent slaves. They become weak, and that is exactly what the plan has always been all along. And you see people looking at, well, look, maybe Trudeau can help us, or maybe Scheer can help us. The wages are too low. We need to raise the wages. We don't need to raise the damn wages. We need to stop the vast inflation, the vast printing, the vast debt that's coming out of the central bank and ending up destroying your wealth, folks, and with that, destroying your freedom and the future of your children. It is sick, it's demented, it's criminal, and people are sitting back and doing nothing about it. I mean, they've often said that saying, when hell freezes over. Well, Canada is becoming hell for millions of people, and it's certainly freezing over right now. What are you doing about it? John, what do you think as far as what people can do about this massive cancer, this monolithic cancer growing on civilization, always growing and has been for thousands of years, failing every single time?
Well, first of all, stop believing in the numbers, and let me finish what I was just about to talk about, the actual fake numbers. I found that the average, like what they actually calculate real estate costs to be in Canada, is 25.6%. That's the weighted, that's how they calculate the CPI, these academics. But then, of course, there's been RBC and others have come out with actual numbers with their market research, and their numbers for when we talk about Vancouver, I think it was as high as 80% versus 25.6, and then in Toronto, Greater Toronto, it was 75 point something. So where's the disconnect there? You're looking at like 50 something percent disconnect in how you calculate inflation. That is just like monetary insanity. So you see just the fakeness of all this. And the problem is that people are stuck in the wrong assets, of course. And if you take a look at the actual, this is for the United States, but it's very almost similar in Canada. And real estate, real estate as being the asset of the bottom 50% is 52.55%, Josh. And of course, your house is not an asset until you sell it or make a profit or rent it out. And then you have the consumer durables, which is ridiculous that that's an asset. You know, it's your car, it's things that deteriorates over time, which is not really valuable. And your house should be under consumer durables, because it is really, you know, a deteriorating asset, because over time it gets worse and worse and deteriorates, right? So that is actually 73% of the bottom 50% assets, versus, you know, you go and look at the actual assets of the ultra rich. It's very well diversified, but it's still, you know, very little that they actually hold in gold and so on, that we're getting to right now. Right. But the reason why I wanted to show this huge difference in where people hold their assets is because the bottom 50% has been told by the banks that, you know, yeah, your house is, you know, great investments, you know, use it as an ATM. That's basically what's been happening here in Canada. And we're running out of increase in monetary supply to keep that, ATM dream alive of a constant, you know, pulling out money out of your house. And then suddenly, well, if you get a drop of 50%, negative equity, like, people are going to be completely done, and there's going to be bankruptcies, deflation is going to be rampant. And the only solution is to print money, buy the central bank, and buy all these fake assets off the bank's books to not have them completely collapse. So what is important here for Canadians is to actually start taking more care of your money and try to understand a little bit of money and economics. My book, of course, is a fantastic way of doing that, because I put it in very simplistic terms for the average person. I didn't write it for you know, the academics out there. I actually wrote it because I wanted to educate the bottom 50% that, you know, doesn't really understand about money and economics. That's what it's for. So pick that book up. But what is important is you need to be well diversified, like the top 1% is. They have their gold and silver. A lot of them, they have their businesses that they're starting. You know, they're actually understand business, how to run it, and of course, having a business and being an investor puts you on the side of, you know, very little taxation, because that's who the big guys is who written the tax laws. And why not, you know, play that system while you can. And then of course, on the other hand, you know, you need to be diversified against what's coming to Canada, which I believe is first deflation, but then it's going to be hyperinflation because of panicking central bankers that, you know, they don't know what's going on in the economy. So what's going to happen there is assets like gold and silver is going to heavily protect you from that inflation. But then on the other hand, cryptocurrencies that are well decentralized on the other side of it will then protect you from the terribly cash-ridden banks that barely have any cash left at all.
And
so that will, that will secure you from the pressure of these bank failures. Yeah. And all of that. Look at what happened
I want to make a legal point real quick that this is John's opinion, not advice. It has to be said because, of course, a bunch of criminals that enforce this craziness on people will come after us and arrest us and make us criminals. So just
I'm just reading the numbers. Yeah, this is the official number. So, anyways, this is so important because, of course, it's only our opinion, but it's a historical opinion on what has worked before throughout thousands of years. Not with crypto, of course. Crypto's been not involved for too long, but again, in Cyprus, it secured people. They were able to use crypto and have the economy working without when they had the bank, holidays and the capital controls coming in.
Well, I mean, same with Venezuela, same with Argentina, same with Chile, all these places. And of course, that subjectivity of value goes back as long as humans have been around. People have decided in a decentralized manner, purchase to purchase, transaction to transaction, what something is worth to them and what it isn't, and that comes down to voluntary interactions. But I have to just say, I mean, I've been getting really pissed off about this because I've been watching. I know a lot of people personally that have been personally affected by this criminal cartel, and they are unable to pay their bills, they're unable to pay their rent, they're going into vast amounts of debt trying to keep up, and I know a lot of rich people that are extremely poor because of this as well. I mean, they just thrown all their money into the wind. Yeah, exactly. So, and on top of that, it's a recession, a papered over one that's been around for a while, but it's getting to the point where it's officially a recession. And on top of that, with interest rates being pushed lower and lower, and looking at negative interest rates in the near future, this is a global issue. It's affecting most countries around the world right now. It's just Canada has always been really bad as far as just vast amounts of regulations and taxes on top of the already existent ridiculous printing of currency. It's just getting really bad, folks, and I think it's really important that everyone knows how to get out of this situation because it's so important. It'll save lives. And I want to just finish this off, John, by going into the solutions because it's important. As per usual, we go a little long with these videos, but I think it's important that people look at self-responsibility, individual responsibilities. Stop looking for people to save you and save yourself. It's at the end of the day, there's a reason why these banks and governments come in and say that they're going to help you, because they're going to do the opposite. They have to benefit themselves somehow, cui bono. People as individuals mutually deciding on things person to person, that is good. That is a free market. That is how people prevail in life, and people make their own decisions, and it's mutually good for both sides. The government, not so much. The banks, not so much. They are just trying to find new ways to make you more and more dependent and slaves to them. So as per usual, as John went into, gold and silver, it's a really important thing. If you look back in history, it's been very prevalent, and history speaks pretty loud and clear about that. And it's about scarcity, application, use, and demand, the subjectivity of value, decentralization. And of course, you can't eat any of these things, as people will say. So, food, water, and shelter, and defense as well. Those are very important at the end of the day as far as being free, living free. Live by example. Don't look for other people to save you. And worry about other people not living free, but most of all, worry about yourself not living free. You have to live by that example. John, as we close this off, what do you think? Final words?
Well, final words is basically people here in Canada believe that whoever you elect into power, they're going to make it better. Look at what the PCs was doing. They were, we're going to put forward some programs that's going to make it easier for people to buy houses. This is just like a tiny little banding and a gushing wound that these politicians are doing. And of course, they're not willing, with the central banks, they're not willing to actually let the system go, because it seems, Josh, that today, ever since, I would say maybe like 2012 or something like that, I got a feeling that, they blatantly just don't want another recession ever to happen. So they're just going to do whatever they can. They're going to buy up all the assets. They're going to, keep on printing a whole bunch of currency in order to prop the system up. And they're not willing to let it go. But it will go at one point. There's going to be, enough people, because of all the money that they print. You might say that, they're just stuck in a housing or the stock market. The thing is, it will trickle slowly into the economy. And when that happens, what we're seeing now in Canada is that inflation is going to just eviscerate people. And of course, housing inflation, which is, one of the most important things that we have is actually to have our houses, right, Josh?
Yeah.
Is just way out of whack. There's no way that anybody would be able to afford anything. And then if they do, they would get into, this totally unsustainable mortgages, which is just beyond ridiculous. And they can't even, raise interest rates. They're at 1.75% in Canada. They couldn't raise it higher before it's, completely out of whack and people are panicking. Our parents, they lived through the 80s where actually they had, anywhere from 16 to 22%. What about that? Like, what if we only went up to 5%? Well, Canadian government, the U.S. government, everybody would be bankrupt. And that's the problem here is they just have reached that point where there's no return back. You just got to keep on printing money. And of course, as idiots like Paul Krugman says, debt is money we owe to ourselves. And he believes that you just can print mass amounts of currency without no ramification. Right. The problem is when people are starving in the streets, and you see in this all across the world right now, people are starving, tiny little, raises in gas prices or a little tax here and there, or whatever it is around the world, that's that tiny little trigger. It doesn't take much anymore to totally eviscerate people around you. And I just start to see that everywhere. We start to hear from a lot of our viewers, they don't have money basically because of this system is just strangling and strangling and strangling. And like, it's not going to get any better. Yeah. And these idiots that believe that we could print money are totally out of their mind, morons that, have wasted 10 years of their life in school to learn nothing but a fraud and a scam.
It's pretty pathetic, isn't it? We're seeing crime skyrocket everywhere, poverty skyrocket everywhere. Things are getting crazier all the time, and there's a reason for it, and it all roots back to this one issue. And people start caring about money. If you can understand what money is, if you understand what money is, then you're able to take control over your own money. And if you can take control over your money, then you are free. Otherwise, if you don't understand money, the people that print the money will have control over your money and over you, therefore, as well. And then you're just another slave on a farm. So start caring. Also, for those that are still watching, thank you so much for still watching all the way up to this point in the video. I want to do a little test as I have been lately. It's a little bit of a study as for how many people actually watch to the end of our videos, because it's important, because we do get a lot of negative comments at the beginning of our videos within seconds of posting it. So I just want to do the study. So basically, I want everyone that's watching at this point to comment below End the Bank of Canada. Right? End the Bank of Canada. Let's see you do this. If you're still watching, if you comment, I will know that you are not a slave, which is good for all of us. I think we're seeing us grow in numbers. You wouldn't know it with the shadow banning on YouTube anyway, but all the same, thank you so much for watching, everyone. Thanks for joining us again, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson with John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, Wham! Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We cannot do it without you guys. Every donation is extremely, extremely appreciated as we're getting incredibly shadow banned. We've lost 80% of our audience since January of 2019 and counting. They are ripping us apart here on YouTube, and the only thing we could do in the meantime as we prepare for the next big step is to ask for help from the viewers that support our free information that we try to post on a daily basis. You can also find us on Subscribestar, where just $1 a month, that's all it takes, $1 a month is all it takes to truly make a huge difference. If everyone gave $1 a month, it would change everything for independent media, and we could win this information war, and we can defeat the mainstream medias eventually. And of course, on Subscribestar, we post subscriber-only content that you'll only see on Subscribestar. So make sure to pledge there, become a patron. That makes a huge difference, guys. And also, don't forget to check out our Bitcoin address below in the comments and description, as well as on the screen for you to scan, if you please. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on the alternatives. We will likely be deleted by YouTube in the next 2 years. It's already happening on a vast scale, so make sure to find us on float.app. That's flote.app. at Josh Sigurdson, as well as at Wham, W-A-M. Float.app is replacing every social media, and I mean, it's just incredible the opportunities it provides for not just creators, but for the average person who wants to get away from these nannies telling them what they can or cannot see. They plan to replace Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon. You could subscribe to us on Float and pledge with cryptocurrency. It's really innovative. We are also on BitChute at World Alternative Media, as well as so many others, Minds, PocketNet. You can find us at World Alternative Media on Instagram. There's many options. And finally, don't forget to join us at Anarchapulco 2020, the famous event, the best liberty event known to mankind, other than perhaps Anarcho Vegas 2020. There are two major events coming up that we are extremely excited about, and you can use promo code WHAM, that's W-A-M, and save 10% on your tickets to these legendary conferences. There's so many amazing people speaking there. You won't want to miss it. So make sure to support in any way you can, even if it's just sharing our videos, pressing like, pressing to be notified. Anything helps, folks. You are the change you wish to see. Thanks for watching, everyone. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.